Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kai. I do bookish content and lifestyle and vlogs. Like the title says, this is 25 books I want to read in 2025, also known as my 2025 TBR. This is obviously not every single book that I want to read in 2025. 25 books just sounded a lot better than 110 books I want to read in 2025. I have 25 books to get through and a lot to say about all of them, so let's just get into it. First one I'm just going to get out of the way because it is the most anticipated book on this list, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. If you have never heard of the Fourth Wing or Empyrean series, where have you been? It is a book with fantasy, romance, dragons, spice. It is set in a war college in a fantasy world. Both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame are 5-star reads for me. I know a lot of people did not like Iron Flame, but if you have not read the Fourth Wing series, first thing I have to say is protect your peace. I have not known peace since starting this series. Rebecca Yarros knows how to write characters that you fall in love with and then rips them away from you. And the second thing is read the series. The second book is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. Goodreads describes it as Caraval meets Throne of the Fallen, which I have read neither of. It has a 4.1 average rating on Goodreads. It's a romantasy, paranormal, dark, gothic. What I understand is there's a necromancer and a phantom, and this is their love story, but it also has like deadly games and trials. You put fantasy, romance, and gothic themes in a book, it's going in my cart. Next is Anathema by Carrie Late. This has a 4.25 average rating on Goodreads. Another dark horror, gothic, fantasy romance. By now, you guys should be understanding a theme here. Romantasy, dark, gothic, suspense, horror. I mean, just look at the book cover. This is beautiful. Directly from Goodreads. It says, perfect for readers who enjoy a plot-heavy and atmospheric story with a unique magic system and a slow burn romance and a touch of horror. Yes, please give it to me. Number 4 is A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't know what's been holding me back from reading this series. One, I'm not the biggest fan of the covers. They stick out on a bookshelf if you are not reading super bright colored books. It's rated as a 4.18 on Goodreads. I'm kind of confused because I know there's spice in this book, but Goodreads has it labeled as young adult. Maybe it's just the series and just this book has no spice. I don't know. But it's fairies and fae, romantasy. I kind of know a little bit about the book. I know that it's about a girl who kills a wolf and then she's transported into the fairy world, but that's pretty much all my knowledge of the book and the series. This brings us right into our next book, which is Throne of Glass, also by Sarah J. Maas. This is rated as a 4.18 on Goodreads. Another high fantasy romance with, I think this also has fae. I'm not 100% sure. Based on this Goodreads summary that I'm reading, it looks like it has some type of deadly game or trial going on, at least in this book. A lot of the books on this list are series. I do want to get more into standalones. I like the commitment and the build-up that series gives me, but a lot of people who have recommended Sarah J. Maas books, they say to read A Court of Thorns and Roses, but that Throne of Glass is the series that they can't get out of their head. I don't know how many books are in this series actually. There's 8 books if you include the Assassin's Blade. Oh, and there's a coloring book too. Anyways, I think I'm going to enjoy this series just based on the other series that I have enjoyed in the past. The next book is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This one comes out in March. It is a prequel to The Hunger Games. This book follows the 50th annual Hunger Games, aka Haymitch's Games. It has been so long since I've read the Hunger Games trilogy, so I think I'm going to use this as an excuse to reread all 3 books, plus the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Next book is Clockwork Angel. This is the first book in the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. It has a 4.31 rating on Goodreads. This is a prequel series to The Mortal Instruments. I read the Mortal Instruments series when I was in middle school and I loved it. This is another book series that really propelled me into my love of fantasy. This would be considered more of an urban fantasy. It's also labeled as steampunk. I absolutely loved the Mortal Instruments, and people who I know also loved the Mortal Instruments actually liked the Infernal Devices series a lot more. I've had these books on my shelf for almost 15 years. Why I haven't read it, I could not tell you. The next book is going to be a full series, but I'm just going to put the first book up. It's The Fellowship of the Ring in the Lord of the Rings series. I was raised by 2 Lord of the Rings nerds. Both of my parents absolutely love this series. We watched the movies at least once a month growing up. I read the books when I was in elementary school, and it's just been so long since I've read them that I think it's just time for me to give them a reread. I have not read them in my adult life at all. It has a 4.4 average rating on Goodreads. The Lord of the Rings is one of those series that is a pillar in most fans' lives. It is a very high fantasy, science fiction, one of the classics. If you don't know what Lord of the Rings is, I don't know what to tell you. If I could never read another series in my life except for one, this would be the one. The next book on my 2025 TBR is Skyshade by Alex Astor. This has a 3.65 rating on Goodreads. This is a young adult fantasy romance. I read Lightlark and Nightbane last year, and at this point I'm just invested to see what happens next in the series. And then I also heard that book 4 and 5 may be coming out this year, but depending on my feelings about this book will determine if I read book 4 and 5. The next book is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. It has a 3.54 rating on Goodreads. It's labeled as a dark academia, horror, vampire, gothic romance, which again is right up my alley. This is another book that I feel I've had on my TBR forever, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet. I'm pretty sure it is a standalone book, and it's only 352 pages. So that's like a quick 2, maybe 3 day read. The next book is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I think this is part of a larger series. I love the book cover art. It's labeled as a gothic mystery young adult fantasy. I'm clearly really leaning into the gothic fantasies this year. It has a 3.75 rating on Goodreads. Looking through some of the reviews on here, it looks like a lot of the readers are pretty split down the middle. They either love it or they hate it. The next book is Assistant to the Villain. This one I also saw has more books coming out this year, or maybe it's one book coming out this year. It has a 3.92 rating on Goodreads. Looks like it's a fantasy romance. From the description, it looks like it's going to be a romance between evil villain boss and assistant. The cover art, not my favorite, but it's been on my TBR forever, and we are going to read it this year. Next up is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. I do like this cover art, but I feel like there's a little too much going on. It looks like it's a witchy fantasy romance, grumpy sunshine, sapphic, cozy mystery. With all of the darker themed books on my TBR, I definitely wanted to put more cozy themes on here because I definitely don't want to burn myself out on one specific genre. The next one is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This has a 4.3 star rating on Goodreads. It's labeled as a paranormal vampire fantasy romance. I actually found the duology with the novella at a thrift store, so I have them on my bookshelf. I just think that I tend to be more of a mood reader, and I've never found the perfect opportunity to start this series, but I think I just need to pick it up. Clearly, a lot of people like this series because I've been hearing raving reviews about it. Plus, with all of the gothic romance fantasy books that I have on my TBR, not a lot of them have vampires. The next book is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This has a 4.07 on Goodreads. I'm gonna be completely honest, it's the cover that convinced me to put it on my TBR months ago. I mean, look, you can't look at that gingerbread and not want that on your shelf. It's labeled as a cozy mystery, humorous young adult fantasy. It's 306 pages. I'm sure this is going to be a very easy read for me. I may even use it as a palette cleanser. This book, it just looks really cute. The next book is Bewitched by Laura Thalassa. This has a 3.93 rating on Goodreads. Now, Laura Thalassa and I wouldn't say we have beef, but she did me dirty with one of her books, and I'm finding it very hard to pick up another one. But a lot of people that I'm friends and mutuals with really liked this book. So I have high hopes, and I really hope I don't get disappointed by this one. It's a witchy fantasy romance. Maybe more of her high fantasy romance will be more of my liking versus her urban fantasy. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna give her another chance. The next is Nocticadia. This is a dark academia gothic romance. It has a 4.26 rating on Goodreads. After finishing Gothicana by Runix, I have a void in my heart for another professor-student romance. Yes, this is based in a college. Now, I don't love the student-teacher romance trope, but the way that it was done in Gothicana, it's giving me the same vibes as Nocticadia is giving me. This is a standalone, but this is 682 pages. She's a big one. Next one is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I did soft DNF this book simply because this was right before I went into a massive reading slump last year, and I knew I wanted to read it, but I was not in the proper space to enjoy a book like this. I think I only got like 1 or 2 chapters in before I ended up putting it down, but I do want to pick it back up because I also want to read Once Upon a Broken Heart after this. Next is A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. This has a 3.93 on Goodreads. It's a cute little trilogy. I heard a lot of really good things about it. It's a fantasy romance with fae and dragons. I actually have the first book on my bookshelf already. I'm not sure how they go about the fae and the dragons. I really don't know much about this book, but I'm excited to read it. The next is The Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This has a 4.21 rating on Goodreads. This is another series, fantasy romance with dragons. I honestly don't know much about this series either. I just got recommended this series by somebody on TikTok. According to Goodreads, it's slow burn, enemies to lover, dragons, angst, banter. It says it will appeal to fans of A Court of Thorns and Roses, From Blood and Ash, Guild, and The Serpents and the Wings of Night. I do like the book cover. It definitely does not match the aesthetic of my bookshelf, but what can you do? If the book is good, I can overlook a non-aesthetic cover. We're getting down to our last 5. Next is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This has a 4-star rating on Goodreads. Cozy fantasy, historical fiction, fairies and fae. It looks like, just from skimming the Goodreads summary, it looks like a introverted scholar in a romance between her and her academic rival. I'm pretty sure this has a second book in the series, and I'm pretty sure I have both of them. I will admit I was attracted to how pretty the cover is. The next book is Red Queen. Now, this book came out 10 years ago now, but I have not read it. It's a young adult dystopia romance, fantasy, fiction. From what I can tell, it has a class system separating the commoners from the elite based on what kind of blood they have. Sometimes you just need to read a little bit of a dystopian fiction, and they don't make it like they used to. Next one is Song of Silver Flame Like Night. This is a young adult mythical romance with dragons. This does have to do with Chinese folklore for. I don't really go for folklore or historical fiction or fantasies, but honestly, I was attracted to this cover and it just looks so cool that I couldn't resist. I have it on my bookshelf right now. It has a 3.79 rating on Goodreads, and overall it looks like a pretty decent storyline. Next one is Shatter Me. This is also another young adult dystopian fiction. The first book in this series came out in 2011. This is another book that I feel like I should have read a long time ago, but it's 2025 now. I'm going back and I'm reading all of the things on my TBR eventually. I feel like most people have read this already, so I won't go too much into it. If you know, then you know. But I'm pretty sure this series has like a million books in it. And the 25th book on my TBR is Arcana by Runix. I don't think this is the official cover because there is no official release date. I'm kind of just putting this on here, hoping I can manifest that it'll get released. What Goodreads says is a rumored sorceress, a villainous scoundrel, an ancient castle. What could go wrong? This is a prequel to Gothicana, which I absolutely loved. It was a 6-star for me. Fantasy, romance, dark, gothic, academia, literally everything that I have loved in this entire video. I'm crossing my fingers that this gets released this year. It is 2:30 a.m. in the morning. So let's wrap this up. If you have any other book recommendations, please leave them in the comments. I am so down to extend my very long TBR. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, comment this emoji. I have all of my socials down below. Anyways, thank you again for taking the time out of your day to watch me yap about books I like, and I'll see you in the next one.